Hello and welcome to Premodern URZATRON. So for those who don't know, the Tron lands refer to these three lands. Individually, they each tap for 1 colourless mana, but when you have them all together, they tap for much more. So the mine and the power plant add 2, and the tower adds 3. So if you have one of each, you get 7 mana, and then every extra one will add however much mana it adds. If you don't want to use the Tron lands, you can also use these Sol lands. They each add 2 mana. This version is more explosive, but it lacks that late game punch and power from having lots and lots of Tron lands in play. These 2 lands are expensive though, so you could play these more budget versions if you wanted to build this deck in a slightly different way. So we're also running some artifact ramp. Mind Stone and 1 Power Stone are probably the best because they can come out a little earlier. Thran Dynamo is still really good though and adds a lot of mana. We're also playing some mana fixing because we have a lot of colourless mana sources, and these can really help us to play some of our big threats. For the bombs, these are the main bombs that we're playing. We are playing 4 copies of each of these. Exalted Angel and Phantom Nishoba are just amazing against aggressive decks, and especially the life gain aspect really helps against those burn decks. Decree of Justice is an absolute powerhouse against control because they can't counter the cycling effect, but it's also really good for its regular mode, putting multiple angels into play. So while those are the main ones, we also play some others. Mastercore, by far the most common because it can gun down all of their stuff, but Eternal Dragon is nice being able to return from our graveyard, and Khan can turn our mana ramp into creatures that can attack. Really, there's quite a few options for this deck, it's whatever you like. Many of these lists also play cards to help cheat these big bombs into play for free, such as Oath of Druids or Temporal Aperture. The Oath builds often form some kind of hybrid list that do play many of the similar cards that Oath lists play. Temporal Aperture is kind of more of a fun card, and it doesn't really see that much play. I just thought I'd include it for fun. We also played tutors, such as Crop Rotation that can find lands, and Living Wish that can both find lands and creatures in a wish board. So our wish board will have all of the toolbox creatures and lands you want, as well as maybe 1 or 2 copies of some big powerful bombs. And of course it will play Urza's lands, so it's an easier way for us to get all of the set in play. For the other value lands, we'll play anything you'd expect, such as Wasteland, Treetop Village. Corehaven is one that I particularly like, especially with Crop Rotation. You can really catch people by surprise if you get this one out at instant speed. And for removal, we're playing Swords to Plowshares. Of course, every white deck plays this. It's just one of the best removal spells in the format. And there are countless disenchant effects in both green and white, so you have the option to play some of these, usually in the sideboard. Other options would include Mother of Runes, which is a nice way to soak up removal and potentially prevent removal later on. Library, very good against control and drawing cards. And Mishra's Helix can be very annoying at tapping them and locking them out. I'd also really like to build a red version of this deck with Crater Hellion and maybe Siege Gang Commander and Wildfire, just absolutely blowing our opponent's boards out. It seems like it would be super fun. And for the mana, apart from the special lands, there's nothing really to talk about. It's just all of the lands you'd expect in a green-white deck. So for the sideboard, we've already talked about the wish board. That will take up most of the sideboard. The other slots are commonly extra disenchant effects and Circle of Protection red. You may also want something like Ivory Mask for combos and Karmic Justice or Sacred Ground for land destruction. So when playing this deck, it's pretty straightforward. We're just looking for starting hands that can ramp things out as quickly as possible, such as this one. We just want to play our lands, play our mana rocks, and do remember, you can tap City of Traitors for mana before playing your new land and sacrificing the city. So we'll get all that mana, then we'll just play one of our big bombs, and ideally just ride that to victory, all the while playing more big bombs on top of that one. Against it, the standard land destruction spells you'd expect work, lands like Wasteland and Dust Bowl, especially against the URZATRON version that requires 1 of each specific land. Against the deck in general, creature removal such as Terminate, Diabolic Edict, things like that, as well as Humility are very good against our singular big creatures. And as a green-white deck, we don't really have too many ways to interact with some combos, so those can be difficult for us to deal with at times. With firmly a kind of mid-range deck, Our strategy in basically every matchup is just to try and ramp out big huge threats as fast as we can and then overwhelm our opponents with the number of those big threats we can put out. Against control, the games can go longer when we're building up our mana for a big decree, but overall our game plan is pretty straightforward against every deck. So the strengths, lots of very fast bombs. We can go both wide with Decree and big with our big creatures. It's fairly beginner friendly, as the deck does essentially very similar things in every matchup, and we do have lots of options and tutors. The weakness is, of course, Wasteland, Land Destruction, combos. The deck sometimes with all those mana fixes can have quite a lot of wheel spinning cards that if we don't have our bomb, we can just get lots and lots of mana. But here's an example list, and as always I do recommend checking out TC decks. There's a lot of different options you can put into this deck, and as always, if you've liked this video, please do like, comment and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and thank you for watching and goodbye.